You wake up every morning believing the same lie they've been selling you since childhood. Work hard, they said. Be good, they whispered. Follow the rules, and prosperity will follow. But here you are, decades later, watching your paycheck disappear into the same black holes month after month while others seem to effortlessly accumulate wealth around you. You've been living what Nietzsche called the slave morality, and it's precisely what keeps you chained to mediocrity. The poor stay poor not because they lack talent, not because they're lazy, and certainly not because they deserve it. They stay poor because they've internalized a moral system designed to keep them docile, grateful, and perpetually struggling. You see, Nietzsche understood something that modern society desperately wants to hide from you. There are two fundamental ways of viewing the world, and the one you've been taught is the one that serves power, not you. The master morality creates values. The slave morality accepts them. And you, my friend, have been living as a slave to values that were never designed to liberate you. When you tell yourself that money is the root of all evil, when you believe that wealthy people must be immoral, when you think that wanting more makes you greedy, you're not being virtuous. You're being controlled. Look deeper into this conditioning. From the moment you could understand language, you were fed a steady diet of moral platitudes designed to make you comfortable with limitation. Be grateful for what you have. Money doesn't grow on trees. We can't afford that. These phrases weren't just observations about your family's financial situation. They were programming your subconscious mind to accept scarcity as natural, limitation as virtue, and aspiration as somehow unseemly. Your teachers reinforced this programming. They told you to be realistic about your dreams, to have backup plans, to understand that not everyone can be successful. They celebrated the students who followed instructions over those who questioned authority. They rewarded compliance over creativity, conformity over innovation. And slowly, systematically, they trained you to see the world through the lens of the slave morality, without ever telling you that's what they were doing. If this resonates with something you felt but couldn't articulate, show me you're listening with a like. Think about the stories you tell yourself about money. I'm not materialistic. Money can't buy happiness. Rich people are shallow. These aren't your authentic beliefs. They're psychological barriers installed by a system that needs you to remain exactly where you are. Because the moment you truly understand that wealth is simply a tool, a form of power that allows you to shape reality according to your will, you become dangerous to the established order. But let's examine how deep this conditioning goes. Notice how you feel when someone younger than you achieves financial success. Do you feel inspired, or do you immediately start looking for reasons why their success doesn't count? They had connections. They got lucky. They probably compromised their values. This is resentment in action, the psychological poison that Nietzsche identified as the core of slave morality. Resentment is not simple jealousy. It's the transformation of envy into a moral position. Instead of saying, I want what they have, resentment says, what they have is morally wrong, and my not having it proves my moral superiority. This psychological mechanism is so sophisticated that it makes you feel good about your limitations while simultaneously ensuring that you'll never overcome them. Nietzsche spoke of the Übermensch, the person who creates their own values rather than accepting the values imposed by others. But look around you. How many people do you know who have truly examined their relationship with money, who have questioned the moral framework they inherited about wealth and poverty? Most people, even intelligent ones, are still operating from what Nietzsche called ressentiment, a deep psychological resentment that masks itself as moral superiority. You resent the wealthy not because they're evil, but because their existence reminds you of your own unrealized potential. So you create elaborate moral justifications for why their success is somehow illegitimate while your struggle is noble. This is the slave morality in action, and it's keeping you exactly where you are. The system doesn't need to conspire against you. It doesn't need elaborate schemes or hidden agendas. It simply needs you to conspire against yourself, to internalize the belief that your current circumstances are the result of moral virtue rather than psychological conditioning. When you believe that being poor makes you more authentic, more real, more connected to what truly matters, you'll never seriously pursue wealth. Why would you pursue something you've convinced yourself corrupts the soul? Subscribe to explore how these psychological patterns shape every aspect of your financial reality. But here's what they don't want you to understand. The game was rigged from the beginning, not through some shadowy conspiracy, but through the moral education you received. You were taught to value fairness in a world that operates on power. You were taught to wait your turn in a system where others are cutting in line. You were taught that hard work equals success in an economy where leverage and strategy matter more than effort. Consider how this moral programming manifests in your daily decisions. When an opportunity arises that could significantly improve your financial situation, but requires you to be more assertive, more strategic, more willing to prioritize your interests over others' comfort, what do? Most likely, you find reasons why pursuing that opportunity would compromise your integrity. You tell yourself that you don't want to be that kind of person. But what if that kind of person is simply someone who refuses to participate in their own oppression? The wealthy understand something you don't. Money is not a reward for being good. It's a tool for exercising will. They don't see wealth as something they deserve because they're morally superior. They see it as something they create because they understand how the game actually works. While you're playing by one set of rules, they're playing by another set entirely. Watch how the wealthy think about problems. When they encounter an obstacle, they don't ask, "Is it fair that this obstacle exists?" They ask, "How can I overcome or circumvent this obstacle?" When they see an opportunity, they don't worry about whether they deserve it. They focus on whether they can capitalize on it. This is not moral indifference. It's moral clarity. They understand that the universe doesn't operate according to human concepts of fairness, and they adjust their strategies accordingly. Nietzsche would tell you that your poverty is not a cross to bear. It's a choice you're making every day by refusing to question the values that govern your relationship with power and money. Every time you tell yourself that you're above the pursuit of wealth, every time you rationalize your financial struggles as evidence of your character, you're choosing slave morality over master morality. The master doesn't ask permission to succeed. The master doesn't apologize for wanting more. The master doesn't need moral justification for pursuing power. The master simply acts, creates, and transforms reality according to their vision. But the slave? The slave turns their chains into a philosophy, their limitations into virtues, their powerlessness into a moral stance. This transformation of limitation into virtue is perhaps the most insidious aspect of slave morality, because it makes change feel like betrayal. If your poverty is evidence of your moral superiority, then becoming wealthy would mean becoming morally inferior. If your struggle is what makes you authentic, then ease would make you artificial. If your limitation is what connects you to the real world, then expansion would disconnect you from reality. You've been trained to see money through the lens of scarcity, to believe that someone else's wealth somehow diminishes your own possibilities. This zero-sum thinking is not natural, it's conditioned. The wealthy think in terms of abundance, expansion, creation. They don't see money as something to be earned through suffering. They see it as something to be generated through value creation, strategic thinking, and systematic action. But notice how this scarcity mindset affects every aspect of your relationship with opportunity. When you hear about someone's success, your first instinct is to calculate how their gain might be your loss. When you see a business opportunity, you immediately think about all the reasons it won't work, rather than exploring how it might work. When you consider investing in yourself through education, training, or skill development, you focus on the cost rather than the potential return. Like this, if you're starting to see how your own beliefs about money might be working against you. But perhaps the most insidious aspect of slave morality around wealth is how it makes you complicit in your own oppression. You don't need external forces to keep you poor when you've internalized the belief that poverty is somehow more authentic than wealth. You don't need anyone to limit your ambitions when you've convinced yourself that having ambitions makes you shallow. You don't need systemic barriers when you've built psychological barriers that are far more effective. Look at how you respond to successful people. Do you immediately look for flaws? For evidence that their success came at the expense of their integrity? Do you tell stories about how they must have compromised their values, how they're probably unhappy despite their wealth, how money has corrupted them? This is resentment in action, and it's poison to your own potential for transformation. The psychological mechanism here is sophisticated. By finding moral flaws in successful people, you create a narrative where success itself becomes suspect. This allows you to feel superior to those who have achieved what you secretly want, while simultaneously protecting yourself from the discomfort of acknowledging your own unfulfilled potential. It's a perfect psychological trap because it feels like moral clarity while actually being moral confusion. Nietzsche understood that the slave morality emerges from powerlessness. When you can't achieve something directly, you convince yourself that you don't want it, that it's beneath you, that pursuing it would compromise your principles. But what if your principles are not authentic expressions of your deepest values, but psychological defense mechanisms protecting you from the fear of failure, rejection, or inadequacy? Consider the difference between authentic values and reactive values. Authentic values emerge from your direct experience of what brings meaning, fulfillment, and growth to your life. Reactive values emerge from your response to what others have that you don't. When you say, "I don't care about money," is that because you've genuinely explored wealth and found it unfulfilling? Or because the absence of money in your life needs to be rationalized as a choice rather than a circumstance? The poor stay poor because they've made poverty part of their identity. They've woven their financial struggles into their sense of self so thoroughly that becoming wealthy would require becoming a different person entirely, and that terrifies them more than staying exactly where they are. Because at least in poverty, they know who they are. At least in struggle, they have a story that makes sense, even if it's a story of victimhood. But identity is not fixed. What you think of as your authentic self might actually be a collection of adaptations to circumstances that no longer serve you. The person who has learned to find meaning in struggle, dignity in limitation, and virtue in powerlessness has developed psychological strengths that could be redirected toward empowerment rather than endurance. But victimhood, no matter how justified, is still a form of powerlessness. And powerlessness, no matter how morally rationalized, is still a choice to remain small in a world that rewards those who dare to expand. Nietzsche would ask you, what if your suffering is not noble? What if your struggle is not evidence of your character, but evidence of your conditioning? What if the very beliefs that make you feel superior to the wealthy are the same beliefs that keep you financially imprisoned? The transformation begins when you stop seeing money as a moral category and start seeing it as a practical one. Money is not good or evil. It's simply a tool that amplifies whatever you already are. If you're generous, money makes you more generous. If you're creative, money gives you more resources for creation. If you're compassionate, money provides more opportunities for compassion. But if you're afraid of money, if you've moralized it into something corrupting, then you'll never have enough of it to discover what you could become with it. Think about what you could create with financial resources that you cannot create without them. Not material possessions, but contributions. Not luxury, but impact. Not status, but influence. When you reframe wealth as a tool for expanded agency rather than a symbol of moral compromise, everything changes. Suddenly the question is not whether you deserve money, but what you could do with money that you cannot do without it. Share in the comments. What story about money have you been telling yourself that might actually be limiting your potential? The wealthy don't think about money the way you do. They don't agonize over whether they deserve it, whether it's fair, whether other people will judge them for having it. They focus on creating value, solving problems, building systems, and making strategic decisions. While you're having philosophical debates about the morality of wealth, they're building the wealth itself. This is not to say that all wealthy people are virtuous, or that all poor people are morally superior. It's to say that the moral framework through which you view wealth is irrelevant to the practical reality of acquiring it. Nietzsche would tell you to go beyond good and evil, to transcend the moral categories that limit your thinking, and to focus on what actually works rather than what feels morally comfortable. Observe how this moral framework limits your strategic thinking. When you encounter information about wealth building, investment strategies, or business opportunities, do you evaluate them based on their practical effectiveness or their moral acceptability? Do you dismiss strategies as manipulative when they're simply strategic? Do you avoid opportunities because they seem too good to be true, when they might simply be outside your conditioned expectations? You have been trained to think of wealth accumulation as selfish, but what if the opposite is true? What if remaining poor when you have the capacity to become wealthy is actually the selfish choice? What if your financial limitations limit not just your own potential, but your ability to contribute to others, to create opportunities, to solve problems that require resources to address? Consider the mathematics of impact. A person with limited resources can help a limited number of people in limited ways. A person with substantial resources can help more people in more substantial ways. This is not a moral judgment about the relative worth of different forms of contribution. It's a practical observation about the relationship between resources and capacity for impact. The slave morality tells you that money changes people, that wealth corrupts, that the pursuit of financial success will compromise your values. But what if money doesn't change people so much as reveal who they always were? What if the qualities that lead to wealth creation, strategic thinking, value creation, systematic action, are actually qualities that could make you a better person rather than a worse one? Your relationship with money is a reflection of your relationship with power, and your relationship with power is a reflection of your relationship with yourself. If you believe you don't deserve wealth, you won't pursue it seriously. If you believe that wanting wealth makes you shallow, you'll sabotage your own efforts. If you believe that financial success requires moral compromise, you'll find ways to fail that feel like integrity. But Nietzsche would challenge you to question these beliefs not because they're necessarily wrong, but because they're not necessarily yours. They're cultural inheritances, social conditioning, inherited moral frameworks that you've never examined critically. The question is not whether these beliefs are true or false, but whether they serve your potential for self-realization or limit it. The Übermensch creates their own values, and this includes their relationship with wealth and power. Instead of accepting the cultural narrative about money, the evolved individual examines their own experience, their own goals, their own vision for what they want to create in the world. They ask not, is it moral to pursue wealth? But, what could I create with wealth that I cannot create without it? This shift in questioning changes everything, because suddenly you're not debating the morality of money, you're exploring the possibilities that money could unlock. You're not defending your poverty as evidence of your character. You're examining whether your poverty might be limiting your character's full expression. The system wants you to stay poor not because it actively oppresses you, though it might, but because it has taught you to oppress yourself through your own moral framework. Every time you tell yourself that you're too good for the game of wealth creation, every time you rationalize your financial limitations as spiritual superiority, every time you judge others for having what you secretly want, you are participating in your own imprisonment. The prison is not made of bars, it's made of beliefs. The chains are not physical, they're psychological. And the key to your liberation is not outside yourself, it's in your willingness to examine and potentially transform the moral framework through which you understand success, power, and your own potential. Nietzsche's concept of eternal recurrence asks you to imagine living the same life over and over again, exactly as it is for eternity. Would you be content with your current relationship with money, power, and potential? Would you be satisfied with the story you're telling yourself about why you are where you are? Or would you want to transform something fundamental about how you approach the possibilities available to you? The choice is yours, but first you must recognize that it is a choice. Your financial circumstances are not just the result of external factors beyond your control. They're also the result of internal factors within your control. Your beliefs, your strategies, your willingness to question inherited moral frameworks, your courage to pursue what you actually want rather than what you've been taught to want. If this content awakened something in you, if you felt the truth of these words resonate, then you are not alone. There are others who refuse to accept that financial limitation is the only option for people of consciousness and character. Like this, if the connection between your beliefs about money and your actual financial reality opened your eyes. Subscribe to explore more about how psychological conditioning shapes every aspect of our potential. And in the comments, share. What belief about wealth have you inherited that you've never questioned? Your consciousness is their revolution. Don't let it be forgotten.